While taking a sip from my glass of water, I suddenly noticed something moving inside it. I looked again. It was tiny. But there was no doubt, it was moving. A tiny bug, inside my drinking water. And immediately, a few questions came to my mind. Where did it come from? How did it get into the water? And the biggest question, is this water actually safe to drink? But here's what caught my attention. The bug may not have come from the place you would immediately suspect. So instead of simply throwing away the water, let's follow the clues and find out where that tiny bug actually came from. Naturally, the first thing I blamed was the water itself. I started wondering. Was something already inside the water? Maybe the water source was contaminated. Maybe something had entered the storage container. Or maybe, something was actually growing inside it. So I checked the container. I looked at the water. It was completely clear. The container looked clean. The lid was properly in place. Everything seemed perfectly normal. And yet, I had just seen a bug moving inside my drinking water. So now I had an even bigger question. Everything looked normal, and yet, I had seen that tiny bug moving in my water. So maybe I was looking in the wrong place. So, I started thinking about what happened after I poured the water into the glass. I had left the glass uncovered on the kitchen counter. Could a tiny insect have entered it during those few minutes? It could have landed near the rim or accidentally fallen into the water. But then I wondered, what if this keeps happening? One tiny bug could be an accident. But if it keeps happening, it's a clue that something else is going on. Then I looked more closely at the water container. Not just the water, the lid. Was it properly closed? Was there a tiny gap? Was the seal damaged? Was there any residue around the opening? I realized the entry point might not be obvious. For a tiny insect, even a small gap can be enough. So I realized I shouldn't just check the water. I needed to check how the water reached my glass. But then I realized something. Before finding out where the bug came from, I needed to know what I was actually looking at. Was it a tiny flying insect? A crawling bug? Something that looked like a larva? Or could it be something else that only looked like an insect? So I didn't want to guess. I took a closer look at its shape and movement, and most importantly, where I found it. Because that little detail could give me the next clue. Then I asked myself one simple question. Did this happen just once, or is it happening again and again? If I found one tiny bug in an uncovered glass, it could simply be an accident. But if I kept finding them repeatedly, I knew I had to look deeper. If it kept happening, I knew this wasn't just an accident. I had to find out what was allowing the bugs to get into my water. And that's when I realized something important. The bug wasn't the real problem. The real question was, what was allowing it to get into my drinking water? Now I had to answer the most important question. Can I still drink this water? If I can clearly see a bug or any unknown organism in my drinking water, I wouldn't simply remove it and continue drinking. I would set that water aside first and find out where the problem came from. And one thing I definitely wouldn't do is add random household chemicals to the water. Instead, I would follow 4 simple steps. Stop using the affected water. Find the source. Clean and fix the source. And use a safe water supply until the problem is resolved. So, I decided to follow the water backwards. I started with the glass. Was it clean? Was it covered? Then I checked the container. Was it clean? Was the lid properly sealed? Was there any residue around the opening? Next, I looked around the container. Was there moisture or spilled water? Were there insects nearby? If you're using a dispenser, purifier, or storage system, check the accessible areas for leaks, standing water, or residue. I wasn't just checking the water anymore. I was trying to find the exact point where the problem started. Once I found the source, I cleaned the affected area properly and fixed whatever was allowing the problem to happen. Because simply removing the bug doesn't solve the reason it got there. Removing the bug solves today's problem, but fixing the entry point helps prevent tomorrow's. There was one more thing I wanted to know. Was the problem coming from one particular container, or from somewhere earlier? I took a freshly cleaned glass, filled it with fresh drinking water, and covered it immediately. Then I compared it with the water from the container where I had noticed the bugs. If the problem appeared only with one container, that container needed a closer look. But if I noticed the same problem with different containers, I knew I had to look further upstream, at the water source, storage, or dispensing system. Basically, I was trying to answer one question. At what point did the problem begin? And that was the clue I needed. And now, the mystery starts to make sense. The problem wasn't simply that I found a tiny bug. The real problem was that something had allowed it to reach my drinking water. The exact cause can be different in every home. But the solution is the same: find the source. Clean it, fix the entry point, protect the water from re-entry. Once I knew the source, preventing it from happening again became much easier. I made sure my drinking water was always covered and kept the container, lid, and opening clean. I also checked for leaks, damaged seals, cracks, or moisture around the storage area. And I made sure insects didn't have easy access to the place where I kept my drinking water. Because the best way to keep tiny bugs out of your drinking water is to stop them from getting access in the first place. Let's go back to the glass we started with. A tiny bug was moving inside the water. At first, it seemed like a simple insect problem. But after following the clues, I realized something important: the bug was only the symptom. The real issue was how it got access to my drinking water. So if you ever find tiny bugs in your drinking water, don't panic. Don't simply remove the bug and continue drinking. Instead, stop, trace the source, clean the source, prevent it from happening again.